Today's deep dive, we're talking Mexican real estate, but we're focusing on you, the foreign investors.
It's a hot market, no doubt, but navigating it can be a little tricky if you aren't familiar with the ins and outs.
Right.
You know, especially when you bump into a word like fideicomiso.
Okay, yeah, that sounds a little intimidating. So let's just back up for a minute. What's the deal with foreigners owning property in Mexico? Is that even possible?
Yeah, it is, but there's a catch.
Okay.
The Mexican Constitution, it has this rule, right, that prevents foreigners from directly owning land in certain areas.
Okay.
And we're talking prime real estate here. The beachfront properties within 100 kilometers of the border and 50 kilometers of the coastline.
Okay, so like the really desirable areas.
Exactly. Think of, Cancun, Puerto Vallarta.
The places everyone wants to be.
Yeah, all those amazing vacation destinations.
Right.
So there's a workaround.
Okay, so how do you actually own a piece of that beachfront paradise if you're not, a Mexican citizen?
That's where our friend the Fideicomiso comes into play. Think of it as your key to unlocking that beachfront property. It's basically a specific type of bank trust that allows foreigners like yourself to legally purchase and enjoy property in those restricted zones.
All right, so instead of owning the land outright, I'm forming a trust with a Mexican bank.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's kind of like having a trusted friend hold on to the deed for you,
Okay.
but you still get to enjoy all the benefits of ownership. Using the property, you can renovate it, rent it out, you can even pass it down. The bank just holds that title as the trustee.
So let's say, hypothetically, I want to buy a beachfront condo in Tulum. Could I do that, even though I'm not a Mexican citizen?
Absolutely. You wouldn't own the land directly, but you'd have that fideicomiso giving you full control, full enjoyment of the property, just as if you were a local.
Okay, so it's kind of like a legal loophole that benefits everybody.
You could say that, yeah.
All right. I have to admit, though, the thought of a bank, technically holding the title to my dream property, it still makes me a little uneasy.
Yeah.
What's to stop them from just, turning around and selling it out from under me?
That's a fair concern, but it's really important to understand that banks that offer Fideicomiso services, they are bound by very, very strict regulations, and they are obligated to act in your best interest at all times. It's not their property to sell. They're simply acting as a trustee on your behalf.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better.
Good.
So rather than a risk, this Fideicomiso is actually designed to protect foreign investors. It's like an extra layer of security, right?
Precisely. It streamlines the process, minimizes the risks, and ensures that your investment is fully protected within the framework of Mexican law.
This Fideicomiso sounds like a lot more than just a workaround, though, right? Are there other benefits to having one?
You bet. The advantages go way beyond just securing that property. There are some really compelling perks that might surprise you.
All right, well, don't keep us in suspense. Let's dive into those benefits and really break them down so our listeners can really understand what makes this Fideicomiso so special. All right, you got to tell us more. Besides owning property, what else can it do?
Remember those international legal complexities we talked about?
Yeah, those didn't sound like much fun.
Well, this is where the Fideicomiso really shines, I think. It provides a layer of protection. So the property that's held within the trust, it's generally protected from any legal issues or creditors that you might have back home.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's huge. So it's less of a risk and more of a safeguard, like a built-in safety net for foreign buyers.
Exactly. It gives you peace of mind knowing that your investment is secure, operating within the Mexican legal system.
That's great.
And it also simplifies inheritance, which we know can be a big concern for foreign investors.
Yeah, no kidding. So how does it make inheritance easier?
Well, with the Fideicomiso, you get to designate your beneficiaries,
Right.
and they directly inherit the property rights. No lengthy legal battles in Mexico, no probate court, no drama. It bypasses all of that.
So no, dramatic will readings with long-lost relatives suddenly showing up.
Exactly. Not if you have a well-structured Fideicomiso.
Yeah.
It makes the inheritance process so much smoother and ensures that your legacy is passed on according to your wishes.
That's a big relief for a lot of people, I bet. Okay, so we know what a Fideicomiso is, we know the benefits, but what does the actual process of setting one up look like?
It's, well, I guess you could compare it to assembling a piece of furniture from IKEA or something.
Okay.
There are a few steps, but with the right instructions and maybe a helping hand, it's very manageable.
Right.
The first thing is you need to obtain a permit.
Okay.
And that permit comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Yep.
It basically involves you providing your information, proving that you're eligible for this Fideicomiso.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
And I'm assuming there are costs associated with every step of the way, right? Because, I mean, transparency is key, especially when we're talking about investing.
Oh, absolutely. And you want to be upfront about that. So you're going to have the permit fee from the ministry, which is about 900 US dollars. And then on top of that, you have your bank fees, which can vary, of course, depending on the institution, but it's typically around $500 US annually.
Okay, so we're talking the cost of the permit, the annual bank fees. What else do investors need to factor in?
This is where, going back to that helping hand, this is where a lawyer comes in, specifically a lawyer who specializes in fideicomisos. They are absolutely essential for navigating this whole process, making sure all your paperwork is in order, explaining all that fine print that nobody likes to read.
Right, so finding the right legal expert is crucial. And I imagine their fees vary as well, so it's good to have that conversation up front.
Absolutely, and it's an investment worth making to avoid those costly mistakes or misunderstandings down the line. And don't forget, of course, you'll have your typical closing costs that come with any real estate purchase, your taxes, notary fees, all that fun stuff.
It sounds like, yeah, having a really clear picture of those costs up front is vital. But what about alternatives? Is a fideicomiso the only option for foreigners? Or are there other ways to own property in these restricted zones? So are there any alternatives to this fideicomiso thing, or is that pretty much the go-to for foreign buyers?
Yeah, the fideicomiso, it's definitely the most common route and usually the most straightforward. But some people do explore setting up a Mexican corporation to purchase property directly.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So instead of me buying the property, it's my Mexican corporation that's making the purchase.
Precisely. So because the corporation is a Mexican entity, it bypasses the whole fideicomiso requirement. So you're essentially operating as a business owner within the Mexican legal system.
So it's a way to directly own property in Mexico, even in those restricted zones then?
Technically, yes.
Okay.
But, and this is a big but, setting up and running a Mexican corporation, it's a whole different ballgame. We're talking a whole new set of regulations, a whole new set of complexities, costs.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
Definitely not for the casual investor.
So a lot more paperwork, a lot more potential headaches.
You could say that. It's really only advantageous in very specific scenarios. Like if you're planning some big development project or if you're going to be heavily involved in, business operations in Mexico. But for most individuals who are just looking to buy a vacation home or an investment property, the fideicomiso is, it's less hassle. It's generally more cost effective.
Okay, that makes sense. So unless you're going full-on real estate mogul, the fideicomiso is probably the best way to go.
9 times out of 10, yes. It's a secure, legally sound, well-established path to owning property in Mexico.
This has been so helpful. But before we wrap up, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear some insider tips, some advice. So for someone who's just starting to think about, exploring Mexican real estate, what advice would you give them?
Oh, great question. My number one piece of advice, do your homework. Don't just jump in blindly. Research different areas, get a feel for the market trends, look for properties that have good appreciation potential.
So don't just fall for those Instagram perfect beachfront photos.
Exactly. Tempting as they may be. Due diligence is key. And speaking of due diligence, vet those professionals you're going to be working with. Talk to multiple lawyers. Talk to multiple real estate agents who have experience specifically with fideicomisos.
Okay.
Read reviews. Ask for referrals. Make sure they're the right fit for you.
So don't be afraid to shop around for your A-team.
Exactly.
What about the timeline, though? How long should investors realistically expect this process to take? Should we be, clearing our calendars for next month?
Not quite. Every transaction's different, of course, but it's best to think of it more as a marathon than a sprint.
Okay.
Realistically, from getting that permit to signing all the paperwork, the whole fideicomiso process can take a couple of months.
Good to know. So if someone is working with a pre-construction property, for example, the timelines might actually line up perfectly.
Absolutely, yeah. And last but not least, never underestimate the power of communication. Clear communication. Make sure your lawyer, your real estate agent, they're on the same page as you. They understand your goals. They understand your budget, any concerns that you have.
Right. No dumb questions.
Exactly. The more transparent and communicative you are throughout the process, the smoother it'll be.
Well, this has been a fantastic crash course in Mexican real estate for foreign investors. Who knew a word like fideicomiso could unlock so many doors?
It really is all about understanding the rules of the game, right? And with the right knowledge and a little bit of guidance, that Mexican property dream, it can definitely become a reality.
Absolutely. Maybe one day we'll be recording a deep dive from your beautiful Mexican casa. Until then, happy investing, everyone.